The world of Iridian 9 had been quiet for months after the long war ended. The sky still carried a red glow from the burned ships that had fallen through its thin clouds. The ground was littered with old metal shells, forgotten machines, and wrecked homes. People said the planet was cursed, but to Luke Carter, it was home now. He lived alone near the southern ridge, where the wind was dry and cold. His small outpost was made of old steel panels and leftover solar cells. Every day he worked to repair broken machines for the rebuilding team stationed miles away. He liked the silence. It helped him forget the screams of war and the memories he didn't want to carry. That night, as he adjusted a damaged transmitter tower on the hill, a strange sound came through the static. It was not a human voice. It was soft, weak, and trembling, almost like a child calling from far away. Luke froze. The sound repeated, shorter this time, then faded into the wind. He turned off his tools and listened again. The silence returned, but something in his chest told him that he was not alone out there. He grabbed his flashlight and rifle's standard habit. Not out of hate, but caution, and started walking toward the noise. The night air was sharp. Dust swirled around his boots as he walked through the field of burned grass and black stones. After a few minutes, he saw smoke in the distance. A small crash, maybe from a pod that had fallen out of orbit. The war had left many such wrecks, but most were empty by now. Still, that sound he'd heard wasn't mechanical. It had been alive. When he reached the crash site, he saw the pod, a small Falari escape craft, half buried in the ground. Its engine was broken and glowing faintly. The door was twisted open. Inside, under a piece of melted metal, lay a small figure covered in dust and blood. It was a girl, or rather, not quite human. Her ears were pointed and furred, her tail weakly twitching beside her leg. She wore a dark combat suit torn at the shoulder, and her face was pale. Luke knew that look. A Falari, the enemy. The same species whose fighters had destroyed his transport ship years ago. He should have walked away. The war was over, yes, but the wounds were fresh. People would call him a fool for helping her. Yet something about the way she was breathing, ragged, uneven, pulled at him. She wasn't a threat now. She was just dying. Luke put his weapon down and stepped closer. Her golden eyes opened slightly, frightened. She tried to reach for something, maybe a knife or a communicator, but her hand fell before she could grab it. "It's okay," Luke said quietly. "You're safe." She didn't understand his words, or maybe she didn't believe them. Her lips moved weakly, but no sound came. He crouched beside her, carefully moved the broken metal, and lifted her into his arms. She was lighter than he expected, her skin cold, her breathing faint. He carried her back through the dark, one step at a time, as the wind howled across the plains. When he reached the outpost, he placed her on his old cot and turned on the heater. The small room smelled of oil and dust, but it was warm. He removed her damaged armor with care, avoiding the deep wound across her shoulder. It looked like a plasma burn, serious, but not hopeless. He cleaned it with antiseptic, wrapped it with a cloth, and gave her a small injection of pain reliever. She winced and turned her head away, but didn't resist. "Hang in there," he murmured. "You'll be fine." For hours he worked, changing bandages, keeping the heat steady, watching her chest rise and fall. When she finally slept, Luke sat beside the heater, his hands trembling from exhaustion. He hadn't spoken to anyone in days, and now a member of a former enemy race was sleeping in his bed. He wondered what had brought her here. A lost patrol? A survivor? Maybe she'd been running from scavengers. It didn't matter. She was alive now because he couldn't leave her behind. As dawn crept in through the broken window, he dozed off. When he woke, she was sitting up weakly, clutching the blanket close to her chest. Her golden eyes were wide, scanning the room. "Hey," Luke said softly, raising a hand to show peace. "You're safe here." She didn't reply. Her tail flicked once, uncertain. He pointed to himself. "Luke." Then he pointed to her. "You." She hesitated, then whispered, "Lyra." Her voice was soft, musical, but strained. The word came out more like a breath than a sound. "Lyra," he repeated, smiling faintly. "Nice to meet you, Lyra." Her eyes followed his lips as he spoke, then lowered to the bandages on her arm. When she saw how carefully they were wrapped, she frowned in confusion. "Why? Help," she whispered in broken English. Luke shrugged. "Because you needed it." She stared at him for a long moment. Then she looked down again, as if she couldn't understand that a human would save her. That day, Luke kept himself busy repairing the generator while checking on her from time to time. She ate only a few bites of food and drank a little water. When the wind blew too hard, she flinched, gripping the blanket tightly by evening. Luke found her standing by the window, watching the dark horizon. The light from the heater reflected on her golden eyes, making them seem to glow. "Where were you going before the crash?" he asked. She struggled with the words. "Raiders. Attack. Ship burn. I run." He nodded slowly. "You were lucky to land near here." She tilted her head. "Lucky or unlucky?" Her tone was gentle, but it made Luke smile. "Depends on how you look at it." The next few days passed in quiet rhythm. Lyra regained strength little by little. She began walking around the small base, curious about everything: how the tools worked, how the generator hummed, how Luke made coffee. When he fixed the tower again, she followed, watching him climb and handing him small parts with steady hands. At night, she sat near the heater, her tail wrapped around her legs, silently staring into the orange light. Sometimes she would hum softly, a tune he didn't know but found strangely comforting. One evening, Luke noticed her staring at an old photograph on his table, him and his younger brother, taken before the war. She touched the edge of the frame carefully. "Family." "Yeah," he said. "He didn't make it." She nodded slowly. "I'm sorry." Her tone was sincere, and something inside Luke softened. For years, he had held quiet anger toward her kind. But looking at her nose, scarred, trying to understand, he felt only a quiet ache. That night, when a cold storm hit the outpost, he found her shivering under her blanket. Without saying much, he adjusted the heater and gave her his old jacket. She refused at first, shaking her head. But he placed it around her shoulders anyway. "You'll freeze," he said. Her ears lowered shyly as she whispered, "Thank you." Days turned into weeks. Lyra recovered fully, but she didn't leave. She began helping Luke with everything: cooking, fixing cables, even guarding the tower from scavengers. Whenever he told her she should go find her people, she simply said later. One morning, Luke woke to find her outside, repairing a broken drone. Her movements were skilled and calm. When she noticed him watching, she smiled slightly. "You fix machines," she said. "I learn." He laughed softly. "You're a fast learner." She looked proud, her tail swaying gently behind her, but not everyone shared their peace. One afternoon, a human patrol vehicle approached the outpost. Luke stepped out to greet them. The leader, a tall man with a scar over his eye, eyed the Falari girl standing behind him. "What is that doing here?" the soldier demanded. "She's not a threat," Luke said firmly. "She crashed near here. I helped her." "You helped one of them?" The man spat on the ground. "You've got guts, Carter." "Or maybe you've lost your mind." Lyra stepped back, her ears flattening. Luke stood between them. "The war's over. Let it stay over." The soldier sneered, but finally waved his team away. "Fine. But don't expect anyone to protect you when the higher-ups find out." When they left, the silence felt heavy. Lyra looked at Luke with uncertain eyes. "Because of me. You in danger?" He shook his head. "I'll handle it." She stared at him a long moment, then said quietly, "I stay. I help." Luke wanted to argue, but something in her voice, soft yet firm, stopped him. He realized she had already made up her mind. That night, the power failed for a few hours. The sky outside was full of lightning, the rain hitting the metal roof like hammers. Luke lit a small lamp and found Lyra sitting near the window, watching the storm. Her reflection shimmered in the glass. "You know," he said, sitting beside her, "you could leave tomorrow. Find your people. You don't owe me anything." She turned to him slowly. "You save me. Give me life." "I stay," Luke sighed. "You don't have to." She smiled faintly, her ears twitching. "I want to." The words were simple, but they hit deeper than he expected. When the power returned, she was still sitting beside him, her eyes half closed, calm. The thunder rolled far away, and the air smelled of rain. Luke looked at her and realized that the silence he once loved no longer felt empty. He didn't know what the future held, whether humans and Filari could truly live side by side, or if peace would fall apart again, but for now, he knew one thing. He had saved her life, and somehow she had saved his in return. The outpost lights flickered softly through the rain. Inside, a wounded alien girl rested beside the human who had chosen kindness over hate. And as the long night passed, she whispered one word before sleep: his name. Luke smiled in the quiet. For the first time in years, he felt that he wasn't alone anymore. Weeks passed after the storm, and the world around Luke's outpost slowly came alive again. Spring winds brushed across the dark soil, carrying soft dust and the faint smell of growth. Small patches of green returned to the planet's gray plains. It was quiet, peaceful, and different now, with two people living under one roof. Lyra had healed completely. Her shoulder no longer hurt, and her steps were firm. She could lift heavy parts, climb the towers, and fix machines almost as fast as Luke. Every morning she would wake before sunrise, check the generator, and prepare something warm for breakfast. Luke often pretended to still be asleep, just to listen to the soft humming she did while working. One morning, Luke found her outside with one of his old drones. She was painting the sides of it with a strange liquid that shimmered silver. "What's that?" he asked. Lyra smiled a little. "Filari alloy coat. Protects from sand and wind. Found it in the wreck." Luke blinked. "You kept parts from your pod?" "Yes," she said proudly. "You fix human things. I fix Filari things. Together, we fix everything." Luke laughed softly. Her tail swayed behind her like a flag in the wind. They worked side by side for days. She learned fast how to connect human circuits, how to calibrate solar lines, how to weld small plates. She didn't speak much, but when she did, her voice was calm, her words careful and soft. Luke noticed she never raised her voice, never argued. She had a quiet strength that reminded him of the soldiers he used to serve with, but hers came from kindness, not command. Sometimes, when they sat by the fire at night, she would ask questions. Simple ones at first. Why humans live alone? Luke shrugged. Some of us like quiet. Some can't find a place to belong anymore. She looked down, then whispered, "I also lost place." He glanced at her, but she didn't continue. He didn't ask. Some pain didn't need to be spoken. Days turned into months. The world outside was changing too. The new human government on Iridian 9 started forming colonies again, rebuilding old cities and outposts. Trade routes reopened. Luke sometimes got messages from the main hub asking him to return for work, but he stayed. He told himself it was because the outpost still needed maintenance, but deep down he knew it was because Lyra was there. The silence was no longer lonely. One afternoon, while fixing a water purifier, Luke saw her standing on the ridge, staring into the distance. He joined her. "What are you looking at?" he asked. "The ship," she said, pointing to a small sparkle far away. "Filari rescue craft. They come sometimes. Search for survivors." Luke felt a small ache. "You could go with them, you know." Lyra turned to him slowly. "You want me to leave?" He shook his head. "That's not what I said." She stepped closer, her golden eyes steady. "You saved me. You gave me home. I stay where you are," he tried to argue, but she only smiled faintly and said, "Humans talk too much. I decide for me." Luke laughed quietly, defeated. She always had her own way of ending an argument with honesty that cut straight through. One day, a message came through the comlink. The colony had detected movement in the area, possibly a group of old raiders. They asked Luke to report if he saw anything unusual. That night, he heard engines far in the distance. He went outside with his rifle. Lyra followed, her ears twitching in the dark. 3 lights glowed on the horizon's small hoverbikes, moving fast. They were not from the colony. Raiders, Luke said quietly. Get inside. Lyra didn't move. They smell wrong. Not human. Mixed group. It doesn't matter, Luke said. It's dangerous. She shook her head. I help. He didn't have time to argue. The bike stopped near the old road. Voices echoed in the dark, harsh and rough. Luke crouched behind a rock, aiming through the scope. Lyra crouched beside him, her eyes glowing faintly in the night. When one of the raiders tried to break into the storage shed, Luke fired a warning shot. The group scattered. A short burst of plasma fire answered, but they weren't prepared for resistance. Within minutes, they sped away, leaving behind smoke and dust. When the silence returned, Luke turned to Lyra. You okay? She nodded. They were scared. Good. He laughed breathlessly. You're not afraid of anything, are you? She tilted her head. I was afraid before. Not now. Why not now? Because you stand beside me. The words made him freeze for a moment. He wanted to say something, but no words came. She looked calm, her eyes reflecting the firelight, as if the storm inside her had already ended long ago. After that night, things changed. People from the colony started visiting more often. They brought supplies and equipment. Some of them gave Luke curious looks when they saw Lyra. A few whispered, but most just nodded politely. One engineer, a young woman named Claire, spoke openly. She's Filari, right? Luke nodded. Claire smiled. They say Filari tech is better than ours. Maybe she can help us rebuild faster.
Lyra
Smiled shyly. It was the first time someone had spoken kindly to her besides Luke. Over time, more humans started accepting her presence. She began helping with translation work and tech repairs. Her soft voice and patient hands slowly changed people's minds. At night, when the workers left, Luke and Lyra would sit near the small fire outside, sharing quiet moments. The stars above Iridian 9 were bright, almost white, scattered like snowflakes. Back on my world, Lyra said one night, sky is blue, not red. We fly in sky gardens. You would like it, Luke smiled. Maybe one day I'll see it. She looked at him with surprise. Humans cannot breathe there, and I'll bring my own air, he joked. She laughed, soft and light. Maybe. Months passed again. The outpost turned into a small station. Machines worked. Fields grew. The world was healing. One morning, a large Filari ship landed near the colony. It carried peace delegates, awful ones this time. Lyra was invited to speak as someone who had lived among humans peacefully. She hesitated at first, but agreed when. Luke promised he'd be there. The meeting took place under the old dome in the colony's center. Human officials sat on one side, Filari officers on the other. Lyra stood in between, nervous but steady. When her turn came, she spoke in simple words. War broke everything, but I saw a human who fixed, not broke. He had reason to hate me, but he did not. Because of him, I believe peace can stay. If one human can show kindness, many can. If one Filari can trust, others can too. Her voice echoed softly through the hall. The room was silent for a long moment. Then people began to clap quietly at first, then louder. Luke watched from the side, feeling something he hadn't felt in years' hope. After the meeting, Lyra found him waiting outside. Her eyes shone like melted gold in the sunlight. I was scared, she admitted. You did great, he said. You spoke from your heart. She smiled. Because you taught me how. Days later, when the Filari ship prepared to leave, the captain approached Lyra. Your people need you, he said. We could use someone like you to help rebuild our world. Lyra looked toward Luke. He said nothing, only nodded, trying to hide his own feelings. That night, she packed her few things quietly. Luke helped her without a word. At the door, she turned to him. You don't want me to go, she said softly. He smiled faintly. I want you to do what's right. She looked down. What if right thing is to stay? He shook his head gently. Your world needs you more than I do. She stepped closer and placed her hand on his chest. My world is big, but here it is, small and warm. He didn't know what to say. The wind blew through the doorway. carrying the faint scent of dust and rain. "Promise you'll come back someday." He said, "I promise," she whispered. Then she left, her silver tail swaying behind her as she walked into the light of dawn. The ship took off, leaving a trail of gold dust in the air. Luke stood alone, watching until the sky cleared. Time passed again, weeks, then months. Luke returned to his work. The outposts grew quiet once more. But sometimes, when the wind blew through the valley, he thought he heard a familiar humming sound, the tune she used to hum while working. One night, when he was repairing the roof, he saw something bright streaking across the sky. It wasn't a meteor. It was a small podfalari design. It landed near the ridge, same place as before. Luke ran toward it, heart racing. When the door opened, a familiar figure stepped out, tail swaying gently in the wind. "Lyra?" he whispered. She smiled, holding a small metal cube. "Peace mission complete. Falari and humans now trade. I came back to help again." Luke stood frozen for a second, then smiled wide. "You kept your promise," of course, she said softly. "Falari always keep promise." He laughed, relief flooding through him. "Welcome home, Lyra." She looked around the outpost and nodded. "Home," she repeated. The sun rose behind them, painting the sky gold and red. Side by side, they walked back toward the outpost, the sound of the wind carrying across the plains. The war was gone. The wounds healed, and the silence was no longer empty. A human and a cat-eared alien had built something the galaxy had forgotten. Trust, friendship, and peace that began with a single act of kindness. And from that day onward, she truly never left his side again.